Howdily doodly, every pony. We're about 2 minutes early. I am joined by. I don't know what to call you. What would you call yourself?
In a lot of these circles, I go by the name of Kaniro, specifically Kaniro Tonada. Um,
Kiniro Tonada?
yep.
Okay.
And if you're good with your Japanese and Portuguese, that translates to Golden Melody.
I am
Uh,
good at neither of those languages. So, um, we are discussing gun control today. Um, you approached me in Twitter DMs, and we just kind of um, just got the basics of it. We didn't really discuss anything, and so I guess the best way to start would just be, what is your position on gun control? I forgot to turn on my camera, but what is your position on gun control?
it's extremely nuanced. Just because, well, I'm going to make it very apparent to everybody here. Yes, I do live in California, and in before the "oh, you're from California" jokes that
Right.
come in. Um, but I have a very so I grew up in California,
Right.
and having seen some of the worst of it, especially if you're familiar with the bank heist that was it 94 95 that caused the assault weapons ban to be enacted here in 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 Cali.
We're talking about the one where the bank robbers were so heavily armored that the police 9 millimeters couldn't penetrate it.
Shotguns and 9 mil couldn't do anything about it. The
Yes. Then
that
yeah,
that
I'm familiar with that one.
so familiar with that, and then me having grown up in the essentially in the farmland near the border. If you're familiar with Imperial Valley,
Yeah.
um, right on the border of between California and Mexico.
Okay.
So I have a very unique stance on this, and it's shifted over the years. But my some of my stances are I do believe that there should be some restriction on what guns should be available to people, with the caveat of yes, I believe everything should be registered, but I do believe that if you want certain weapons, like a for the argument's sake that everyone always likes to talk about, have an AR-15 with AR-15 platform, you know, with without having a limitation on a magazine or any of the limitations that have to be on it. I think you have to be able.
Oh shit! Did
Oh,
I
hold
lose
on.
you?
No, that's me. That's my that's
All right.
it's my shitty Corsair mouse. But I believe that if you want to have that style of weapon without having the modifications that the state requires, I am of the opinion that you should have to go through a proficiency test to show your competency. Otherwise, you humbly should not have that kind of weapon. Um, and the reason I have some of that opinion is because growing up in some of the farmland of California, you one of the things that isn't talked about, especially in national politics, especially if you live on a border state with on next to Mexico, is that there is a huge, I mean huge, issue with gun running. Everyone likes to always talk about, oh, but people being smuggled across the border and drugs being smuggled across the border. It's for the lack of a better term, it's a there is a new uh, a new triangle of trade that had been going on since the I want to say it was the late 70s onward, where semi-automatic weapons were being smuggled in exchange for people and uh, contraband drugs.
Okay.
So that that's at least covers the opinion of why at least a register your weapon, who it belongs to, is one of those things, because everybody likes to have that argument of I need to have access to this gun or have this type. Insert any type of weapon you want because the bad guy will have this kind of gun. Well, I'm like, but we're kind of the ones that are doing that because of some of our beyond lacks. Uh, you know, I won't even say gun control, but gun registration that had caused some of that. So you'd see
Let's see.
guns.
If, let's see
Oh, go ahead.
if let's see if I understand what your position is. It's that because you said something about a proficiency test, but I'm not really sure I understand what that is supposed to achieve. Now, if you're talking about registering firearms, I'm completely on board with this. The only problem that we have is that there's a federal law in place that disallows the ATF to have a searchable database. So they're basically just running off of paper.
Yep.
They have computers that they can digitize the records with, but it's designed specifically to be unsearchable.
Yep.
And I think if I were to do anything, I think the easiest policy to implement would be to take away that stupid ass unsearchable database. That if we're trying to track firearms, that is.
Oh yeah.
I'm not sure what the utility of a proficiency test is. Most of the time, whenever you're doing a proficiency test, are you talking about skill, or I'm not really sure what we're talking about.
How can I put this? Because in I speak of this as someone who does this as as a sportsman hunting. Um, when you have friends and family when you go hunting, for example, they're not going to immediately hand you a shotgun and say, "Hey, here you go." They're going to make sure you can handle what you're dealing with.
Right.
And I am of the opinion that the certain weapon types or the lack of safeguard modifications for some people, because let's face it, we deal with a society that's rather stupid.
Right.
They have to be able to show that they can handle it safely and can actually be trusted to have that kind of weapon. So kind of like here in California, if you are a active duty law enforcement or active duty military, but you reside within the state, those safeguards for those types of weapons do not apply to you. Just for the record,
Okay.
because you essentially have proved your proficiency with it. But once you retire from active duty, if you bought that gun when you were proficient, it is kind of expected that you will continue to do so because you've gone through the proper training to utilize said weapon.
I guess my issue is that I mean, don't get me wrong, it's great to have education out there, but when we're talking about legislating something, I don't think that accidental discharges or like fatal incidents regarding like accidents or people being unable to safely operate or handle their fire or store their firearms, I'm not so sure that this is actually that big of a deal. I don't think that this is happening the most often. I believe that when we're talking about gun deaths, the types of deaths that we're trying to prevent are homicides and suicides. Whenever we're talking about accidental gun deaths, we're talking about I mean, don't get me wrong, it's still a force multiplier in that it's, whenever you're talking about an accident, then it can make things much, much worse. But whenever we're talking about issues that we're trying to legislate away, I don't think that accidental discharges are really the focus. We're more focused on suicides and homicides, right?
Yeah, I mean, yes. I guess I was also coming from the perspective of when people say what before I get into the trying to reduce homicides and suicides, would have been like what kind of weapons were available to what kind of people. Because you have this very active crowd that says every weapon should be available to everybody.
Well,
Um,
and I would I would agree somewhat. I don't think that people should have access to explosives or whatever. There is arguments to be made that simply having the capital available to buy explosives would necessarily, curb a lot of the people that would get get those types of firearms. Like, getting an RPG or whatever is going to cost like, 10 grand or some shit like that. And there is, that right there is your barrier for entry. But I don't think that, that's just an aside. I don't think that people should have access to like explosives or whatever. But I think when it comes to small arms, like, any type of semi-automatic weapon is perfectly fine. And I think that most conversion kits for, like, to make semi-automatic weapons into automatic weapons are banning these things just makes them more popular. That's all they seem to do. And so, I mean, I think that it's important to keep automatic guns out of people's hands. We should not have fully automatic weapons floating around. But I think when it comes to semi-automatic weapons, I think that it's rather silly that we keep trying to change the tools, because all we end up doing is making the gun manufacturers jump through hoops in order to give us exactly the same shit that we had already anyway. For instance, like the AR-15 and the AR pistol, like they put a strap on the butt of the gun and now it's a pistol. And I don't know, it's just trying to regulate that kind of shit it seems to be an enormous waste of time, in my opinion. Would you agree?
I can agree to a point. But then this is where it's kind of like, how can I best state this? And forgive me, I have a how can I say this? And I do apologize. Sometimes it does take me a little bit to form my thoughts, because
you're all right. Don't worry about it.
Probably going to be the first time to admit this publicly, but since I'm bilingual, I actually process things in two languages in my head, and I have to decipher it. So,
okay.
Okay. So, essentially, I agree with you to an extent. I don't think manufacturers should have to be going through those kind of hoops to make certain guns compliant for a specific state. But then that's where I say the state should essentially have a way to have a proof of safety for somebody who wants that style of weapon if it's considered too dangerous. As an example, I guess you could say I'm of the opinion, and as an example, I think that someone who has the competency and training to use like anything beyond a bolt action, rifle wise, just for the record, or so anything that would be considered semi-automatic has to go through some sort of training and safety course and guideline to have, because essentially, even those in law enforcement who have these kind of weapons, who are considered exempt, have to go through this kind of training to safely have one and operate one and keep one at home. Because they can still have their locker at work, they can still keep their issued weapon at work, but if they want it at home, they just have to prove that they're safe enough to do so. And if in a world where we want to make sure we put the same regulations on cops as we do on people, I know it's a stretch, but if the people want those kind of weapons, I think we should put the same emphasis on them to train to use that kind of, rifle.
We're back. Here's my only problem with this is that we're back on accidental stuff and unintentional, because people who are people who aren't proficient with firearms and know how to use them safely and all that crap, the benefit of requiring people to go through training and safety and stuff like that is hopefully to be able to curb the amount of unintentional firearm deaths. The problem with this is that we're talking about a statistically insignificant number of deaths. We're talking about annually we have, like, I want to say it's over 10,000 gun deaths. Or no, it's like over 10,000 murders. I want to say like 15,000 murders that happen in the United States every year. And when we're talking about unintentional firearm deaths, we're talking maybe under 1,000. I'm thinking like 500 or something. So, and that sucks and everything, but I just don't think we can legislate this away because people who have been through training still do stupid shit. So
I mean, that's true, but then it would also keep the average Joe Schmo from wanting to also purchase a weapon to kind of commit that kind of atrocity, I guess, for lack of a better word, because
people who screw up, because I feel like doing a proficiency test or requiring people to go through training
because it acts like a deterrent in a way, because someone who's willing to do that then has to go on the record, essentially have their name on a file of some sort, like we had chatted earlier about, essentially have something be searchable, and that would have to be the first step before any of this else comes through. It
right,
essentially acts.
I think that tracking firearms and giving the ATF the ability to track firearms is a completely separate thing from proficiency tests.
Not in the way when it comes to deterrence of trying to get people who shouldn't have that kind of weapon to begin with. Now,
I don't think
in fairness,
this is my okay. I'm trying to be as clear as I can be. Unskilled people, morons with guns that accidentally kill people, it doesn't happen enough for me to really worry about it. You know what I mean? So I'm not worried about somebody who doesn't know how to use a gun that accidentally shoots their balls off and that happens. Like I'm not fine with that, but I don't care so much about that more than I care about homicides and suicides and trying to keep people from ending up in those situations. Those are the ones that I'm worried about. Those are the incidents that number in the thousands, while this unintentional firearm death thing is a couple hundred. Like I said, maybe 500 or something like that. I can't remember exactly the number.
I guess I'm phrasing this wrong, and maybe it's on me, but I'm trying to come at it from the homicide perspective, because in a way it's acting as a deterrence for someone to have to go through the process. And I'm not saying not every one of those homicides somebody's had a gun sitting in their drawer or in their closet or in their gun safe for years on years, but it's the ones that would be interested in committing that homicide, that crime, that would stop them from moving forward with a plan if they have to go through that particular process to acquire said weapon. And I'm talking from a legal perspective, because they can't stop you from buying a weapon before if you're going to contemplate committing a crime. That's not going to change. But I guess if you want to call it the theater of security, the illusion that's there, that will deter some people from it.
Wait, hold on. I'm totally against all of that. I'm 100% against anything that has to do with just the theater of security. That stuff, it doesn't really work. Whenever you say the theater of security, when we're talking about like, what's the fucking airport security called? The TSA. The TSA is entirely security theater. They do nothing. They don't prevent anything. These people are only there to help our feelings. If we're going to legislate something, I would want it to have a demonstrable effect. Doing something for the security theater is a complete waste of time, especially because conservatives lose their fucking minds anytime you want to do anything related to guns at all. And so that to legislate something that expressly has no purpose other than to make people feel better is like I said, it's a complete waste of time. It has to have some kind of demonstrable effect.
I mean, but that's the thing. It's kind of like, at what point do you say it's just that it doesn't have that kind of effect? Because ultimately, it's just like prevention in medicine. You know that it works to an extent, but you don't have actual metrics to prove it by.
Oh yes, we do though. They do double blind studies. They do trials where they go and they will do placebo tests or placebos versus the thing to be able to actually get the effect and to measure that effect. We test medicine like crazy.
Well, no, I know, but it was more of what the hell's the study I'm trying to reference here? Fuck, I'm sorry, you lost me on that one. I had it in my head and I lost it. That's fine.
Okay. You were saying that. Well, shit, I lost it too. Okay, so you said.
Well, it's more of how do we. When it came to the security of theater, and this is why it does help, because it acts as a deterrence only in the regard that if you make something appear or actually is more difficult, it does dissuade some people. Like, have you ever walked into like a Target, for example, and forgive the shitty analogy, but this is something that I can relate it to. You ever seen like the cell phones or like the actual product that they put on those display tables?
Yeah.
Okay. Those security alarms that are on there, yes, they will go off to alert somebody. But the fact that if someone is trying to, someone's trying to take one of those pieces of electronics, that cable isn't really going to do anything to stop anybody, because it could come in with a pair of diamond cutters, cut the cable, and run. But it's the thought that someone is going to be found out that makes it act as a deterrence.
No.
So
that's not true. They tether things down because if somebody has the intention, if they go into and they case a place where phones are like tied down or whatever, and they go in with a pair of wire cutters in order to steal shit, then they're going to do that. It's kind of like, have you ever heard the expression "locks keep honest people honest"? Have you ever heard that expression before?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so if what you're doing is you're taking away the opportunity for people to just grab it, right? They would have to come in there with a specific intent of stealing the phone, and so I have no idea how this relates to proficiency tests and training.
Okay, because it's essentially putting something in the way, like a tether, a cable, to make someone second guess, hey, is this what I'm going to do? I
wonder if there was anything. I just don't think that that's true. I don't think that that's been demonstrated, because and I'm pretty sure that we would have had the data on this because they had the Brady bill for the longest time. Now in Oklahoma, I can walk into a gun store and I can walk out with a new gun in 15 minutes. Easy as pie. Back in the day, you had to wait. There was a waiting period. I have no idea. I would assume that because they did away with it, it had no demonstrable effect. Like this didn't work.
Here,
but I'm not entirely sure.
Here in California, we have a 2-week waiting period.
Okay.
On all firearms, just point blank. But there is a requirement, a specific requirement, that if you are going to purchase a handgun or a pistol, for that matter, you do have to have a secondary proof of residency. So, like a power bill or an insurance statement, whatever. Um, and that, on my own, having a couple friends who do work at some of the local gun stores, do
Can
stop
I
people.
can I stop you real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm looking at the a article from virginialaw.edu, or it's law.virginia.edu, and it is study shows Brady Bill had no impact on gun homicides. So I like I said, I don't think that this having them go to a training course or whatever. I don't think that this is actually going to be doing anything. Anything, and having them go through a training course is not going to be any more helpful than a, you know what I'm saying, that it's not going to be any more helpful than just a straight up waiting period. Do you want me to send you this link on Discord?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll give it a once over.
Um,
See, but the thing is that
and just to be clear, when I Googled, all I Googled was effect of Brady Bill. I didn't say, was the Brady Bill absolute dog shit and it did nothing, and I went and looked at a bias source or whatever. That this is, yeah, it says the Brady Bill, the most important piece of federal gun control legislation in recent decades, has had no statistically discernible effect on reducing gun deaths, according to study by Philip J. Cook, a Duke University professor of public policy, economics, and sociology. The Brady Bill seems to have been a failure, Cook told an audience in Kaplan Pavilion on March 11th, but that doesn't mean gun control is doomed to failure. And I agree. I'm not saying that gun control is a complete waste of time. I'm just saying that I have yet to have heard anything from you that really that seems to have this, that will have any effect other than, as you said, security theater.
I mean, but that's the thing, is that in a lot of cases, there's, with having to navigate the landscape in and of itself, um, there's realistically, outside of security theater, and and I'm saying this as a gun owner myself, there there isn't much you can physically or feasibly do without somebody coming up in arms. But then again, somebody, no pun intended, will do that anyway, no matter
Well,
what happens.
yeah, well, I mean, I guess I understand. You can pass any law, and there's going to be a demographic that's pissed off about it. What my issue with liberals in general is that gun control legislation, especially the type of shit that they fucking say whenever they want to do gun control legislation, is always such dog shit with absolutely the worst rhetoric that just makes conservatives lose their fucking minds, and it has no effect. They don't actually do anything really. They just say that they're going to do these things, and it's almost politically irrelevant bullshit. But I mean, there is something to be done. I agree. I will agree with that. My problem is that the way that the politicians are currently handling it, all they're doing is ostracizing a potential voter base. If they would just back off of the gun control stuff. When I say gun control stuff, I'm talking about people saying that they're going to ban certain weapons or whatever. They're going to do an assault weapons ban, and they're always talking about the AR-15, which is so just ridiculous. It's so stupid because the AR-15 doesn't even register on a graph when we're talking about gun homicides or suicides or anything. Like, it's just so dumb.
Well,
So that's my issue with the conversation about gun control. I think that there's things that can be done, but I don't think that, I don't know about these ideas. I don't think that they're really going to work. You know what I mean?
it's maybe not. but I guess I come from like I said, that hunter perspective. As a sportsman, as a hunter. Now keep in mind, I will preface in California, there's only so much you can do hunting wise, quail, pheasant, and whatnot. So I did a lot of small game, but you also,
There's like hunting seasons and stuff like that, right?
oh
You,
yeah,
so
absolutely.
there are seasons where you can like hunt deer and shit like that, right?
Yes, but you have to go way up north.
And you have, well, I mean, yeah, like I can't go hunting deer in downtown Tulsa, so I understand that you'd have to travel a little bit. But there's like gun ranges where you can go and shoot guns, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's actually one like 3 miles from where I live.
Yeah, and then you can go outside of city limits and you can shoot all the guns you want, correct?
Depends on the county, but yes.
Well, I mean, all of this sounds fine to me as is. I'm not saying that it's all perfect, because obviously we have a problem. Just to get this out of the way, I just want to throw this out there.
Mhm.
The We are against banning all guns, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, just to make sure that that's not a thing, because that's the stupidest fucking thing that people say pretty often. And the Democrats are not coming for guns. It's just not going to happen. It's absolutely impossible. Um,
Yep.
so
Like,
if I were to, let me throw a couple of ideas at you and see what you think. Because I'm also a gun owner. As you've probably seen on Twitter, I have guns and I like to shoot
yes.
guns.
Jealous of some of the ones a couple you got, but yeah.
So, I guess the first one and the easiest one, in my opinion, would be allowing the ATF to have a searchable database and be able to track the movement of firearms. And that if a gun is registered to you, then you are responsible for that gun. And when I say you are responsible for it, in that if what's your name again, by the way?
Canero.
Canero. Okay. If I gave Canero a rifle and I said, yes, you go hunting with this thing, and you take that rifle and you, I don't know, stand up on top of a McDonald's and start sniping people or whatever, then I should be held responsible for making that gun available to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the ATF currently doesn't have a searchable database. They're basically working off of paper. And they digitize these, but the computers are specifically designed to be unsearchable, and I think that's bullshit. It's the stupidest fucking thing ever. And so we should have better registration and tracking of the movement of firearms. And if I were to make my gun available to you, then I am responsible for that firearm. So if someone breaks into my house and I don't have my firearms locked up, and like I leave them unattended at home, and someone breaks into my house and steals my gun, then it needs to be reported as stolen in order
So that you're
to,
no longer liable for
yes,
it.
and so that I'm no longer liable for it. And then it becomes
Oh
an
yeah.
illegal firearm. And but the thing is that it becomes a legal firearm. So then if someone takes this, or if like whoever stole my firearm gets pulled over and they go, hey, let me see the serial number on this gun, it doesn't mean anything to them. They can't look at anything because we have right to carry. So just having a gun is not anything at all. So all you have to do is say, hey, I have a gun, and then that's the end of that exchange. And so I think that could be a big thing. Also, I think that it's pretty stupid. Hang on one second.
No words.
Also, I think that it's stupid to blanket ban everyone with a felony from having guns. I think that's stupid. I think convicted felons should be allowed to have guns. They can currently have long guns, but I think convicted felons should be allowed to have handguns. And having a blanket ban on convicted felons having guns is stupid. I think that we should be using red flag laws in for certain offenses. If you're convicted of domestic violence, if you have a history of domestic violence, you are several times more likely to commit further gun violence, right? To go out and kill people or do a mass shooting or something like that. That one and animal cruelty is another one.
Before you jump into that third point, I'd like to talk about the first two.
Okay.
And kind of in an agreement with you, but for different perspectives, and something that isn't chatted about a lot.
Okay.
So the searchable database needs to be a thing, because it does put the duty and the responsibility on the gun owner, first and foremost, and two, it would crack down so heavily on gun running into Mexico. Which is one of the sources of power for, the cartels. And it's something that is not talked about often. And having lived on a border state for so long, especially out in the rural areas, it was a huge problem in California. But since we started putting some of the pieces of legislation on, whether it was because of certain restrictions or the state database for that matter, it cut down on it here, but then it just shifted it to Arizona. But that's why that solution for a searchable database through the ATF would heavily crack down on that. And that's a big deal, that has a force multiplier on multiple different avenues, whether you look at it from, not having guns go into Mexico, then be modified for automatic use, and then get smuggled back, or, gets used for, gang warfare in Mexico that then spills over, yada, yada, yada. So that's that first point. So 100% in agreement for you, but for much different perspectives, but definitely responsibility on the gun owner.
Okay.
Number two, I am also of the belief of the red flag law, but I also believe that convicted felons, once you pay your debt to society through time, your debt is paid. Your rights should be restored to you fully. That's not up for debate. I don't think it should be, but and whether it be voting or owning a gun.
Well, they get the right to vote back.
Right. But in some states it's not. But you know what I'm getting at.
Right, I get it. It's a common misconception that you lose your right to vote for the rest of your life if you're a convicted felon. But they do, at least in Oklahoma, you can't have handguns. You can buy long guns. You can get like shotguns. I think you can get rifles. I know you can buy shotguns for sure. Even with background checks and everything, if you're a convicted felon. I know that for sure, but people who go to jail or go to prison, that is, they're convicted of like DUI. Your third or second one of the DUIs is a felony, and now you've lost all of your guns. These people are drunks, right? They don't represent an increased risk for violence. I think that we're just focusing all of our shit in the wrong place. I think it's fine the way it is. I don't really care either way, to be honest with you. I just as an aside, I think that felons should be able to have guns. I think that we should be focusing more on history of domestic violence and animal cruelty. These two things correlate heavily with gun violence in the future. And so if you do these things, or if you are declared incompetent or something like that, then you can't have guns. I'm pretty sure that's the way it works right now. But that's the way red flags laws should work at a bare minimum, is that if there's an established pattern of behavior of animal cruelty and domestic violence, then you shouldn't have guns. You should, lose your ability to have guns for sure. Which comes back to the ATF having a searchable database, because it's not like it's really gonna fucking do anything, because the only thing that pops up is felony conviction, and domestic violence is and animal cruelty both are misdemeanors. So people who like to torture animals as a hobby and beat the shit out of their wives, they can go have guns, and it's perfectly fine. But the guy that, drove drunk twice, he can't. I think that shit's fucking stupid. So
Yep, and
that's
it
what I
could
would
have just
change.
been for slightly buzz driving too, and it's
Or
kind of
just
shitty.
being drunk and around your car with your keys in your pocket. That's the way it works
Yep.
in Oklahoma. Actual physical control. But the the ATF having a searchable database is the only thing that I can think of. Also, red flag laws. Those two are the only ones that I can come up with as a baseline for the bare minimum of what we should do, because banning all the guns is stupid, and banning certain types of guns, like, you know, you can't have a forward grip on your AR-15 or whatever, is just so asinine and a waste of time, and all it does is piss people off and turn people away from voting lib.
See, and the funny thing is that I never understood the pistol grip, the forward grip thing, where it's like you can't have this or that, but yet you ask anybody who's used it in a professional sense or a sporting sense, and it's like, no, this is for better, a sense of control. So why would you want to hinder, something that would allow it to be operated more safely? Like I
Well,
didn't. I didn't.
in reality, I mean, let's be entirely real. The only people that are really aided by that kind of thing are, like, you know, IRL operators or whatever. Most people that put forward grip, like, if you look at my shotgun, I've got an angled forward grip on my shotgun. That shit on there provides me no extra support or whatever, not in any real way. It's strictly 100% LARPer shit. Like, and I'll just admit that. It's cool, okay? I got that shotgun specifically because it looks cool, and I'm going to go kill soda cans with it. I don't know. I don't have the delusion of, like, this home defense thing, because that's actually, as far as I've been able to find, is a myth. The self-defense gun type of shit. But
I've made the comment many a time, when it comes to home defense, quotation marks. A handgun, a shotgun, is most of the time, even just the threat of hearing someone cock a shotgun is like, oh shit, I'm fucking out here. And yeah, like, anybody who says otherwise, I would like to call you a derelict. But
yeah, well, I mean, even just brandishing a firearm, I'm not entirely sure about this. I'd have to look it up. I haven't read anything about gun control in so fucking long. I'm coming into this kind of dry, but I've just got like basically 5 little points that I, anytime somebody talks about gun control, I talk about those 5 points, and it seems like most people, even conservatives, seem to be like, yeah, that's fine. Like, the most controversial thing that I've said is the red flag laws. That tends to make conservatives lose their mind. But for the most part, I think I'm pretty agreeable on gun control, even though I'm not strictly, like, completely hands off saying we need to have personal nuclear firearms or whatever. But the in home defense, I want to say that the data bears out that having a baseball bat is actually more beneficial than brandishing a firearm, and that firearms have a tendency to escalate aggression, and has a tendency to make things much, much worse, and that a baseball bat is actually is probably better for home defense.
oh yeah, which,
so,
ironically, it's my baseball bat is next to my safe.
so how do you feel about drugs?
um,
Because
it's a
I
mixed
feel
bag.
like it's so related. I feel like the drug war
It's
is absolutely related to gun control.
it is. Because when I made my point earlier of gun running,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the tie, because that's how a lot of the people who either do the smuggling or commit the violence to do so, that's where they get them. Like,
Yeah, it's
uh,
funded by the drugs.
oh yeah, and the thing is that back when I used to live in Imperial Valley, there used to be this very, very well reputable, well-to-do off guy that prior to the assault weapon ban of California, that's what he did. And for the record, for those of you who don't know, guns, firearms are illegal in Mexico. Well, asterisks, mostly illegal. The only way you can buy a gun in Mexico is to go to the Army National Depot in Mexico City, the capital, and apply for a permit, which you can get, but the waiting time is atrocious. It's like 5 years, but you can definitely own a gun in Mexico. But most people who want to have one get them smuggled from the U.S. And yeah, that's this guy. This guy bought like a super plantation-y looking home in the middle of this of SoCal desert, and that's how he made his money.
Mm-hmm.
This was at a time.
Gargod in chat asked a question. He says the issue with baseball bats is what if the person who breaks into your house is armed? The likelihood of you getting into a gunfight in the middle of the night and not being injured by it is so. What's the word I'm looking for? Hang on, let me try to explain this more concisely. If you are accosted by somebody with a gun who is breaking into your house and they have a gun, the likelihood of you surviving a gunfight with them is it's not significant. Like if you were to just hide, or if you were to just like attack them or whatever, both of these pretty much have the same outcome. If somebody breaks into your house with a gun, I would assume that they are there to do harm to you, and fuck yeah, blow that son bitch away. But statistically speaking, it's you're not more likely to get out of it unscathed with a gun than you are with a baseball bat.
And to kind of build off of that too, and this is a wise piece of advice from my granddad, is if someone's breaking into your home with a gun, what the hell have you been doing to get that to happen?
Well, that kind of shit just happens, like because I would never ever in a million years go, oh, someone broke into your house with a gun. Well, what did you do? Like,
right, but the thing is,
I don't do any of that.
I know, but it's the likelihood that if random acts of violence, I think so, that there was a study back in the 90s that they said random acts of violence are not actually that random. In
right,
a lot of cases,
right,
it's
always
someone
somebody
you know.
Yes,
Yeah,
of course.
And somebody to take that level and be that belligerent against you. Joke aside, it is, what did you do to push them to that length? Or are they just batshit insane? And the batshit insane theory is, I think, very, very rare that they would go to that level to just break into your house armed like that. So
Right.
that's why
My whole thing is that if someone is actually breaking into your house, you have home field advantage.
True.
And so we have a plan in our house where if somebody's breaking in, we're going to retreat to the nearest closet, and we're just going to be sitting there with our loaded guns, and they can have whatever the fuck they want in the entire house. We have enough money to replace all of that shit, but if they come into that closet, then they're catching a double-aught buck shell to the face, and we're just going to start unloading. But the plan is that if somebody's going to come break in, I don't give a fuck. We're just going to chill. If they're not going to do any kind of what's it called? If they're not there to do me any harm, I don't give a shit. They can have all my shit. I don't care. But I don't think I that would not be a prescription that I would make for other people. I think that other people would be morally justified in going on the offensive in that case. Me personally, I would just hide in a closet and if then they decided to investigate that closet, then they die. That's it.
Yep. And even then,
Gargod in chat says guns in Mexico are illegal. LOL. Most of people buy them from dealers, and if the gun is used to assault or hurt people, the police won't do nothing. I hear the cops in Mexico are a little bit screwed. I've heard that. When I used to work construction, they would say that, like, if you got pulled over, you'd have to hand them your driver's license, and they would feel on the back of the driver's license for cash. And if you didn't have cash sitting behind the driver's license when they took it from you, then you were getting a fucking ticket, and they were getting like whatever they could think of to throw at you because you didn't pay them. So I've heard that the law enforcement situation in Mexico is totally fucked.
Yes, but it has gotten a lot better since, especially with the institution of the Mexican Army's National Guard. Because those of you who know a bit about the country, that's actually a recent addition, and that's been there to help supplement the military police that are being deployed because of said issues with the either federal or the municipal police.
Did
which
I
is
ask
kind of
you?
Funny.
I brought up drugs, but I don't remember if I asked you if we're for decriminalizing drugs in their entirety.
I would say a majority of drugs need to be decriminalized, and because it's not because I don't think how to put this. Drug abuse should not be criminalized because that's actually a sign of someone having a moment of weakness, and getting them help should not be like throwing them in prison to suffer.
It's a health issue, not a criminal issue, right?
Yeah.
Right, we're totally on the same page. I think we should decriminalize all drugs. Fuck it. Let them have it, And then if they get fucking addicted to the shit, then they can, they go to the hospital as if they had any other kind of medical condition. And that's just how I feel about that shit. But
to answer,
go ahead.
To go to Gargod's thing, but that's why I'm of the opinion of the ATF here in the U.S. To essentially have that searchable database so that guns stop being smuggled from the U.S. into Mexico, so that they're not available for dealers to use. Now, of course, there are going to be other options for dealers in Mexico to get weapons. Like, they can get them from other manufacturing, like, that is a thing. But the thing that hurts dealers in Mexico is that they need to make sure that their profit is still high, and getting guns from the U.S. is the cheapest source of doing so. So getting them from other countries that would mass manufacture, like Russia was a big one back in the 80s and 90s, where they would just be like, fuck it, we're selling it to whoever. It's, free. Not...
Gargod in chat says most of the dealers get them from Army or cops, and from South America too. I wouldn't think that getting them from the U.S. would be the cheapest way to do it. I think that they might be doing that, but I think that that's mostly whenever we're talking about U.S.-Mexico border, I'm pretty sure most of that's just drugs. Because guns are everywhere, and they're much cheaper in other parts of the country, or other parts of the world, that is. In America, they're uniquely expensive, but that's just because not a whole lot of people buy guns in the U.S. It's not like Singapore, where like everybody's got a fucking gun in Singapore. Everybody's trained with firearms, and I believe that they have mandatory military service.
Conscription.
Yeah. And shit like that. So everybody's got a fucking gun in Singapore or whatever. So I'm that's kind of unrelated because that's over, across the pond. But the point that I'm getting at is that it sounds like we're mostly almost 100% in agreement. I'm not entirely sure about this proficiency test thing, but it sounds like all of my prescriptions are working for you. Would that be correct?
For the most part. Yeah, it's more of like, how to put it. The only thing for the proficiency test was just to prove you can actually operate what you've got, you know what you're using,
Right, I
and
understand. I
and
understand
that
that that
was
would be the purpose, and I understand that like these classes are available for anybody to take if they want to. If not, the majority of people, and when I say the majority, I mean I'm talking about like 95% of people buy one gun, and then it's actually wait, hold on, I believe it's actually 90, like literally like 94% of people that own guns. 94% of them buy one gun, they load it down with ammunition, they stick it in the glove box of their car, and then it just collects dust. That's 94% of guns in the US. The other 4% of guns in the US are owned by a very small number of people. I want to say there's only like 4 million people in the US, and they own like 95% of the guns. Because they're like collectors or something like that. The majority of people don't have, guns or whatever, or use guns or whatever. So that's why I'm saying that being trained in how to use these guns and whatever is not necessarily. I don't know. I think
well,
that if I
it
dug
was,
deep enough, we might be able to find data that it what might actually have the opposite effect.
I guess it's more. I was saying the proficiency test should exist for certain types of weapons. For example, semi-automatics. I think that people should be trained to own one, operate one, and then you're on the register. You've got one, just like any other gun, but just says, hey, you've showed proficiency. You're allowed to have this. Otherwise, if you don't want to take the proficiency test to prove you can use it and operate it, you're stuck with bolt actions and lever action and a handgun.
If they
Probably.
don't know, well that's just the thing though, is that handguns are the vast majority of homicides and suicides in the United States. Rifles are statistically irrelevant, and on top of that, I would okay. What's the effect? What is the desired effect of proficiency tests? What is supposed to what are you trying to curb?
Essentially, it would almost be like a trade-off to not have the modifications on certain guns, to say that you are trained to have what rifle you want to own. Now I know we're
This
we're,
is a
we're
good
looking at this from
idea. It's
like
a
I
good idea. I am not saying that that's not a good idea for people to train with their firearms. Totally get that. Very good idea. But what is the desired outcome of this? Because to me, what this says is that it's going to reduce, or the desired effect is to reduce unintentional gun deaths. Correct?
not necessarily unintentional gun deaths. I mean, it would also have the effect of keeping, yeah, some homicides down, and also
Well,
limit the.
wait. Really super quick. I'm trying to be very gentle. It's just
Mhm.
it's so silly to me, and the reason why I say that is because what we're essentially saying is that so we're the I don't want the robber to be, if someone has the intention of going and killing people, I would rather the robber be improficient, or whatever the word is. I would rather he be a complete jackass with his gun and not be able to use it, and be one of those people that tries to stuff it in his pants and he blows his own dick off, than somebody that is trained in the use of a firearm. So when we're talking about intentional homicide, when we're talking about committing crimes against people, I don't know if this is going to have the effect that you think it will. The only thing that I can think of that it might have a beneficial effect is reducing the number of unintentional gun deaths, which, as I've said like at least 3 times now, that it's an insignificant number. It's very insignificant, like 500 per year. We lose way more people to like car accidents, homicides, suicides, cancer, smoking, like all of these things, or even just like, I'm pretty sure more people are killed by deer every year than accidentally shooting somebody. So I don't know. Like I said, it has to have some kind of demonstrable effect for me to be like really behind it. You know what I mean? Did I lose you?
No, I'm still here. I guess I'm looking at this from the perspective of also trying to find a solution that stops painting the rest of us gun owners in a bad light, but also would allow us to say, hey, these things are here to try to stop certain mass shootings from happening.
Mass
Because the
shootings
guns,
also are another one that, when it comes to mass shootings, I think the only thing you can really do is try to keep the guns out of the hands of those people. And the only thing that really correlates is with that is a history of domestic violence and animal cruelty. If people who are convicted of these crimes, even though they're misdemeanors, if we disallowed them from having a gun, if the only way that they were able to get their hands on a gun is for it to be illegal for them to be in their presence, you know how like a convicted felon now cannot be in the same vehicle as someone that is carrying a gun. They can't be in the same house. Shit like that. If we did that with red flag laws talking about domestic violence and animal cruelty, then, you know, that would curb a lot of mass shootings right there. Because like the Parkland kid, I want to say he got his guns from his dad or some shit like that. Those were legally purchased firearms. He was perfectly legal in possessing those firearms. No. He bought those guns himself, didn't he? I can't remember. I listened to the interview.
so the dad bought the guns, if I remember correctly, and I could admit if I'm getting that story wrong.
Well, in any case, mass shootings are horrific and they're scary and they make great headlines whenever you want to sell some clicks and ad space. But other than that, it is entirely irrelevant to the conversation whenever we're talking about mass shootings. Like I said, they're scary and everything, but you can't legislate that kind of stuff away. It's just not going to happen. The only way that we'll be able to do that is to come at it indirectly through stuff like red flag laws regarding domestic violence and animal cruelty.
I mean, I'll agree with you on those points. I just think that extra piece, and you know, it's my opinion, and I'm not saying necessarily you have to agree with it, but I'm just of the opinion of having all of those things
Of having proficiency
together
tests.
would you know, having
All the stuff I said
responsibility.
in conjunction with proficiency tests. Is that what
Yeah.
you're saying? Okay.
Yeah,
And I get that, and I'm you know, well, I a little bit am trying to convince you out of that position, but it's fine if you still hold that position. I was just trying to explain why I disagree and why I think it's kind of a waste of time.
And I respect it. Like I said, I come from this from a perspective of someone who likes to hunt, and you don't want to give someone, a novice, a firearm that they're, you know, that requires some educational pieces to work with first. And I'd almost say that'd be true of any, but I also feel as someone who's done this for a while that there are some that you can pick up and shoot like an idiot just fine, you know, ergo Ruger 22. But you know, but
Most
you know,
guns
something
that actually 100% of guns that I've ever bought have come with an instruction manual. And so people can opt in to read the instruction manual, and if you have you know, a 70 IQ and are able to like mouth breathe your way through the instruction manual, you'll get all the information that they'll teach you in any kind of training course. All the training courses, it's all the basic rules. Treat every firearm as if it's loaded. Don't point it at anyone or anything that you don't intend to kill, or destroy or whatever.
And I guess that's where I agree with you, and I would love to believe in the essentially the honor system here, because it's essentially what it's leading into, that most people would do it. And there's gonna be a good chunk of people who probably will, and props to them. I know I was one of those people, but
That's
there's
even highly trained people, fuck around and find out, so to speak.
Yeah, and I guess it's more of it would remove any at least in my opinion, any doubt that the person who has a certain tier of weapon would be okay to use it. And again, I come from that hunter perspective, and
if this was if we were what's the word I'm looking for? If we were mandatorily conscripted, if we were all military or whatever, then
fuck it. Like that would be fine.
That would make sense, what you're saying, that most people would have to be trained in the use of a firearm. This doesn't really work. The military has way better they have way better success with voluntary recruits than they do with conscripted people, or or people that are drafted or whatever. Those people don't turn out very good, and they're not, whatever. But the point I'm getting at is that you would need extensive training in order to stick it to somebody in a way that is like riding a bicycle. But sitting in an 8-hour class or something, or even like a weekend class where you go like 3 days, like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, in a 24-hour class, like where you do 3 8-hour courses or whatever. First of all, there's not that much to cover with guns whenever you're talking about gun safety or being proficient with them or whatever. But requiring everyone to go through CLEAT, CLEAT, by the way, is an Oklahoma organization. It is the Council on Law Enforcement Training, Law Enforcement Education and Training. In order to open carry in Oklahoma in a security capacity, you have to go through a CLEAT class. But the way we have it now, you can just buy a gun and just strap it to your hip and go walking around like some kind of fucking jackass if you want to. So anyway, we've been going for about an hour, and we can go back and forth and continue to disagree on that point.
I do want to poke your brain on something, though, to kind of keep this moving, if that's okay.
No, go ahead.
What is your perspective on the constitutionality on the Second Amendment? Where do you stand?
It's a constitutional amendment. I'm not really sure.
Well, obviously, but what's your translation of it? Like, what does it mean to you?
The well-regulated militia stuff.
The whole thing, not just tiny excerpts of it.
I think that it means that we can have guns, and that we should have guns, and that that it means that that shall not be infringed, that it is a right for us to have guns. Does that make sense? Or is that disagreeable?
I mean, it makes sense. And I was going to ask you, do you know your history of the Second Amendment? Other than, obviously, it's in the Constitution, but what brought in the fact that caused that Second Amendment to come into being?
I would assume it would be the Crown, the British acting like jackasses and trying to take the colonists' guns in an effort to suppress them. I assumed that's why it was included in the Constitution.
So what if I told you that's not it?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so and I love this story because it sheds a new light into into the constitutional amendment, and it kind of gives you a much different perspective on why it came into being. I'm not going to argue the this fact of who should have guns, etc. But here goes. So after the end of the Revolutionary War, you do understand that the Declaration of Independence was not the first binding article for the
Right.
U.S.
Right.
It was the Articles of Confederation.
Right.
So during that transitionary period between the Articles of Confederation and the U.S. Constitution, there is an event in history called Shays' Rebellion. Are you familiar with it?
No, not off the top of my head.
Okay, so Shays' Rebellion was took place in Massachusetts a couple years after the end of the Revolutionary War, and these people who were rebelling, they were former Continental Army soldiers. They were promised a pension for fighting, and when the U.S. ended the Revolutionary War, as we all know, we were kind of broke and indebted to the French crown, right?
Okay. Would you say that Shays' Rebellion was an armed uprising in western Massachusetts and Worcestershire in response to a debt crisis among the citizenry in opposition to the state's government's increased effort to collect taxes on both individuals and their trades?
Yes, but it was also because the people that were rebelling were because they were promised a pension. It was specifically because of that.
Okay.
But they weren't given a pension because people were arguing about how to collect taxes and how to essentially brush. And every state was like, well, we don't want to, we have our own taxes to take care of. We have our own things to take care of. This Continental Army was a not federal, but central government issue. They should pay it. And it was an argument of who should pay these people. That wasn't being sorted, and hence why people began uprising, these soldiers. And keep in mind, most of them were kind of up in arms without firearms. These are people with pitchforks, torches, people like they were like 3,000 strong.
Okay.
Now to move this story on along a little more forward, this was a major crisis at the founding of our nation, and there was no military or anybody to be able to put it down. So you see a bunch of wealthy merchants from Boston and the city I can't pronounce it. Essentially, the police force, the constable, blah, 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 whatever.
I got you.
Pretty much rapidly gathered people who had fought in the militia during the revolution and reformed a militia under the pay of some of the wealthy in Boston to put down this this rebellion, this insurrection, because this was about to threaten their new way of life. So we go in, the Massachusetts militia and some mercenaries that come in for the wealthy, and they put down this rebellion, and we pretty much slaughter almost something like 2,000 of them. And but this was the major inflection point, because we didn't have a document founding a military force or what have you. And militaries, as we know, are kind of expensive. So I think it was a year or two after the rebellion, Shays' Rebellion specifically, that's when the Constitutional Convention comes together and they start writing what needs to be in the Constitution. And the Second Amendment, as a result, is the thought process of, well, if there are any threats to this new country of ours, we need to be able to respond. But there were two lines of thinking at the time, and the first one is standing armies are the tools of despots, because that's what they are thinking of coming straight out of the revolution. You know, we were oppressed by the standing army of King George III, and we don't know if we want to give that power to a central executive.
Okay.
The second thought process is, well, they're also expensive, but if people want their freedom, they'll defend their freedom at any cost. So what do we do? In an effort to keep expenditures down, because again, we're broke, people will defend their freedom on their own and organize and come together on their own, but with some oversight. Um, Hence, where the premise of the Second Amendment comes into being has nothing to do with the British coming in during the Revolution to take people's
Fighting
guns or
tyranny
arms.
and all that stuff. Yeah, I
Yeah,
gotcha.
it was for two reasons: because we didn't want to spend the money, we were broke, and we wanted to have, you know, maximum effect for little cost, and that was our way to do it.
Okay.
So it's not something that's discussed often, because the moment we talk about this, and if you were to tell any conservative this, they would say that this is not true. But especially since a country just founded betrayed the people who helped you know helped it achieve its independence, and we massacred these soldiers. It's a stain early on this country. So nobody wants to talk about it, and that's why Shays Rebellion isn't talked about at all in our history. So to preface back to the Second Amendment in its entirety, to reread.
Oh.
It states, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And
I lost you again.
can you hear me?
Go ahead.
It says to read the Second Amendment in its entirety, knowing that we were, as a country, some cheap motherfuckers. We wanted to pass that off on the citizenry to defend the country. Fuck if we have to pay them.
Oh, okay. Alrighty.
But that's kind of the weirdness with the Second Amendment, and how everybody argues it nowadays, of how the right to bear arms should not be infringed. But do you know why that comes into being? And it's because you, as a gun owner, have the responsibility to defend your country. The whole thought process of it is to have a gun to protect yourself from tyrannical government is actually the opposite, because we came in and completely fucked over a group of people who we owed their gratitude to. And I think that puts it in a different light.
Well, I mean, it was just that this was like, you know, this was like a couple hundred years ago, and certain words don't have the same meaning anymore. It's just, the meaning of things change. So I'm sure that the Constitution was talking about muskets or whatever, and we have AR-15s now.
Oh yeah.
And so it's a little bit different, and fighting a tyrannical government or whatever the fuck is. I mean, it's LARPy shit. Don't get me wrong, because the majority of people wouldn't. The majority of people would just lay down and take it. And nobody really knows what they're going to do unless they're being put in that position. And so I'm not going to sit here and say that I would fight a tyrannical government or whatever the fuck. I just like to kill soda cans, and that is the extent of my knowledge and my defense of the Second Amendment, is that I want to commit genocide against soda cans with my 12 gauge and my 9mm. So that's really it for me, is that basically, who was it? It was Jim Jeffries that said, I'm in favor of the Second Amendment because fuck off. I like guns. And that's basically it. And anybody that does that, like I said, anyone that does that, I'm gonna fight against the tyrannical government or whatever, is they're on some we don't know. My point is that they're just on some incredibly fucking larpy dumb bullshit, because they have no idea. If the fucking ATF came kicking in their door, there's a very good possibility that they will just fucking lay down and piss their pants and cry and shit and cum all at the same time, rather than actually fight, because that's just how the majority of people work.
Oh yeah, and like I mentioned earlier, I come from the hunter perspective. I like guns for recreation. Not gonna lie, mostly to go hunting. But if I can go pop a couple rounds, sure, why not?
Yeah, the only times I've ever used guns in a defensive was to protect chickens. I had chickens, turkeys, geese, guineas, llamas, cows, horses, all kinds of shit, and fucking people would dump their dogs out there. Coyotes would come out there. After I had 3 llamas, and they all got killed by dogs eventually. Like, it took about a year where they would have injuries and shit like that, and then eventually they just wouldn't make it, and whatever. And so, yeah, we killed all kinds of shit out there. We killed raccoons and possums and people and dogs and cats and all kinds of shit, man. It was a good-ass time.
But in any
anyway,
case,
it's about 10 till midnight. Do you have any final memes for us before we wrap this up?
Final memes.
Any final thoughts, anything that you want to wrap up? Did you gain any new perspectives, or are you still on the idea or whatever? Go ahead.
I'm still going to hold, some of my opinions, but I think the nice thing is that there's a lot more common ground that can be achieved, and then just like the nuances of everything else, then it's a matter of seeing if the other things after that will work.
Are you where do you fall on the political spectrum? Do you find yourself more to be like a leftist, or like a liberal, or more like libertarian in the center, or like a conservative, that kind of thing? Where do you fall?
I am a social democrat, and if you know what that is, I owe you a cookie.
Yeah. I'm also a fellow sock dem, so it makes perfect sense why we just sit here and just jerked each other off for an hour and a half and basically agreed with each other the entire time.
But the weird thing is like I've chatted with some of my friends who are libertarian, and I mentioned the ATF thing, like the database. I'm like, yeah, but my privacy, and I'm like, your right has a responsibility. Are you telling me that you don't want to be responsible, Mr. Don't Tread on Me?
Yeah, with great rights come great responsibility, or whatever Spider-Man bullshit.
Yep.
Totally get to. Yeah, I totally get that.
But I will make one final note on the whole gun debate here. I will be honest. People who use ARs are pussies, and an M1A is better.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I just have to.
Alrighty.
Well,
I've always been partial to the AK platform, to be honest with you.
Bad?
Yeah, I've had one, and they're a lot of fun, and they were extremely reliable. I never had problems with mine. I've had my dad's got an M4, and that the M4 is okay as a platform. It has a tendency to get really kind of fucked.
Yep.
Where double feeds and shit like that. I don't know if that's his particular gun or whatever. MP40 is superior. God in chat says. If we're talking about just guns in general, just like even guns that we use in like video games and whatever, then you'd have to go with something cool like a fucking LMG or whatever, some belt fed. Or
Look,
like a minigun or whatever.
If we're gonna go to that route, the answer is and always will be the FG42, just hands down.
What is that from?
It is a specific German paratrooper rifle.
Oh, okay.
Actually, it is the basis of, I believe, I think it's like the basis of what would
Oh
eventually
wait,
become.
dude, hang on. Gargod's blowing me out of the fucking water. He said a ray gun. Duh. Like we're talking about real guns in here. Fuck that, dude. I'm getting energy weapons. I'm having a laser rifle from like Fallout or some shit like that. If we're talking about guns that, whatever. That's what I want.
You're gonna get that laser musket.
I don't know about the laser musket. I want the no. Fuck the laser musket. I want one of those cool ass like fully automatic big boxes with a handle on it and just go to town with the laser whatever.
Yes, you are correct. It was the FG-42 was the base of the M60 once it was essentially deconstructed and they essentially rebuilt the thing. But what's that word when they? It's not they redesigned it, but when they take it apart to try to figure out how it works. Fuck, I can't remember.
I'm not sure.
Reverse engineer. There we go.
Well, all right, Ben. We're about a minute and a half short of an hour and a half. So, hey, it was cool talking to you and whatever. If you ever have something that you want to talk about, if you ever scroll in my timeline and you've got some kind of contention, I am always super willing to talk to pretty much anybody at any time. Especially Tuesday through whatever. But thanks, Gargod. I appreciate you. You're the only one that's not a Fed. I said to my Discord server that if you weren't active in chat, then you're a fucking Fed. And everybody in Weary Kieran, you're on thin fucking ice, buddy. You only commented once, okay? But Gargod, he's definitely not a Fed. He's one of the boys.
To quote my good friend, if you ain't here, you're either a Fed boy or an alphabet boy, and neither of them we like.
Alrighty. Well, thanks for joining us all. We had we didn't have a whole lot of peak concurrence or whatever, but we did have a lot of people cycling through, and we appreciate everybody joining us. We will see you all tomorrow for the slaughtering stream where we're going to talk about music. I said tomorrow. No, I'm talking about Wednesday. Wednesday at noon, we will see you. Yes, best. All right, we'll see you. Bye.